Good evening and welcome to Veterans Voices, a special about honoring our veterans across the country and right here at Fort Drum. I'm Alex Hazard.
And I'm Isabella Colello. Our first story tonight comes to you from Fort Drum when I sat down with Command Sergeant Major Rachel Terrell. Rachel Terrell's journey with the United States Army started back in 1994. Her most recent assignment has been serving in the 10th Brigade Support Battalion in Fort Drum, New York. But she said that her decision to serve stemmed from her family and her mentors.
I initially was going to join the Air Force. I come from a family of Air Force men and women, and one day me and my friend went down to the recruiting office to sign up with the Air Force, and she signed up first, and I went across the hall to the Army recruiters, and they were like, hey, come on in, let me show you this video of the Be All You Can Be. And I watched it and I was like, wow, I think this is what I want to do. I was fortunate enough to have really good leaders to lead and coach and mentor me to become a leader. But it took a lot of dedication, a lot of hard work. I kind of wanted to go left. My leaders wanted me to go right. So I just had that right leader to point me in the right direction.
Throughout her time with the United States Army, she has been deployed twice with Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom, and has received assignments across the country and all over the world. Now, as a Command Sergeant Major, she helps soldiers every day prepare for the unexpected.
Our job here is to support the brigade, 1st BCT, and we support them by any means. We don't tell them no. We're the Brigade Support Battalion. So whatever it is that we need to do, we need to find a way, or we make a way to be able to make sure that our brothers and sisters have what they need in the fight. If we don't have a way, we find a way. And if we don't, we make one.
Just as someone saw the potential in Command Sergeant Terrell, she sees that same potential in her soldiers every day.
I think the most eye-opening experience for me is just to see the soldiers that you have grow, their growth. When you see soldiers come out of advanced individual training and they're young, and then you get to see them grow into sergeants and platoon sergeants and first sergeants, to me that's just amazing, just to have a small part of that part in their life. As leaders, you share the good and the bad experiences, so the soldiers that are coming up behind you, they don't make those same mistakes that you made.
And as a woman in a senior leadership position, she is using her role to be a leader not only for her current soldiers, but to help inspire future generations.
So now with the onset of Army 2020, we're seeing women leadership in all formations, at all echelons, and that's refreshing to see, especially for the younger generation. They need to be able to see soldiers, people that look like them. If you're in a leadership role, you have to act like a leader, and you have to be someone that someone wants to follow. So I think that's the main importance, regardless of you being a man or a woman.
Find a way or make one is the phrase used by the 10th Mountain Division, and it's easy to see how Command Sergeant Major Terrell has used that throughout her career.
In the military, probably my first 4 years, I really didn't see too many senior female leaders. And it also made me want to be a leader because I didn't see any. And so somebody seen the potential in me and said, I'll help you, but you gotta listen. But I'm glad because, it's time for me now to pay it forward.
Command Sergeant Terrell is being assigned to Fort Bragg in North Carolina, and we wish her the best on her next journey.
We'll be right back after these messages.
Veterans Voices, brought to you by AUSA.
Welcome back. They were secret soldiers speaking a language the enemy never cracked.
Meet one of the last Navajo code talkers next.
The greatest thing was sacrificing our lives for our country. It wasn't just a duty, it was a responsibility And we knew that we had to defeat the enemy or they would defeat all of us, take what we had.
Roy Hawthorne and more than 400 fellow Code Talkers volunteered from both sides of the state border inside the Navajo Nation of New Mexico and Arizona. Now, the idea to use the Navajo language as a communications code in the Pacific Theater came from a military man who once lived on the reservation. He knew the Navajo language was incredibly complex and only known by a small group of people. Young Navajo men were recruited, and this was to create the code using common names in their language to describe the military terms like battleships, tanks, and reconnaissance planes.
It's quiet, doesn't carry any armament. That's a hummingbird. In Navajo, it was Dakitien.
In battles across the Pacific, Code Talkers would relay thousands of messages with no errors, and their code would never be broken by the Japanese. Hawthorne and the others had used their language as a successful weapon, a native language that was ironically often prohibited in reservation boarding schools at home.
The language was discouraged. The use of it was discouraged.
The role of the Code Talkers in the war was kept secret for decades. Only much later were they acknowledged and their story fully told. Hawthorne says despite the hardships his native people had endured on American reservations, when the war came, frustrations were set aside.
We were loyal to our country. It wasn't because it was called America, but it was called a people that were willing to do for other people. That's the way we treated one another.
Roy Hawthorne passed away in 2018. Very few of the original 400 Code Talkers are alive today, and there's a big push in New Mexico to create a museum to honor these heroes. Last year, the New Mexico legislature and the governor pledged more than $1 million to start construction of the museum. Veterans Voices, I'm David Romero.
Our next story is about making sure that those who serve are never forgotten.
Meet the photographer that is capturing the faces of our nation's veterans.
All I remember was like getting hit in the head with a baseball bat.
When you've taken a bullet to the helmet like Bill Purcell has,
You got nailed down.
your story has to be told.
February 1st, 1968, Way City.
Truth is, this entire room is full of Marines and sailors with unforgettable stories.
There we go, right here. 1, 2, 3.
And a veterans charity is making sure they don't go untold any longer.
Just looking right at the camera.
John Reedy is a photographer for the Greatest Generations Foundation, a nonprofit aimed at preserving the history of American heroes.
Looking right to me. There we go.
The charity has been gathering groups of Vietnam and Korean War vets like this all over the country for portrait sessions.
This is probably the most meaningful work that I've done in my career. Looking right at the lens here. Nothing kind of compares with leaving something that you know has a legacy and has an impact that this kind of work does. Okay, gentlemen, can you get a little bit closer together? To see people when they follow me that they talk about how this actually can bring tears to their eyes to see the portraits, you know, and to know that the work conveys that kind of emotional impact is kind of awesome.
It is a rare moment to shine for veterans who have never sought the spotlight before.
I was in Korea from all of 1952.
Men like 88-year-old Ted Gembinski of Colorado Springs, Colorado, who fought on the cold battlefields of Korea, the so-called Forgotten War.
When I wear my cap or people can see that I was there, I just let them know it was my turn.
It's a big deal because I think that most of those guys, the Korean War vets, need to be recognized because they and the World War II vets were the ones that we built on.
Some of these men spent decades in the service. Some did more than one tour on the battlefield. For Dennis Sedlak of Longmont, Colorado, service is in his blood.
I enlisted because my dad was Navy and World War II, and that seemed the thing to do. You couldn't look your dad in the eye if you didn't serve. It significantly altered my life to the point that I will say that I am back from the war. I am not home from the war yet, and I'm some 52 years later.
And just looking right at the camera. Perfect.
Their portraits will be made into a commemorative photo book alongside 70 other Korean War vets from all over the country and more than 50 Vietnam vets.
Try to see into their eyes and just try to see who they were. Hopefully we can do that.
The books will be given to schools and museums all over the country so future generations can learn about their place in our past and how to hopefully keep what happened to them from ever happening again.
It's very important. History repeats itself.
For Veterans Voices, I'm Jeremy Hubbard.
More stories from Veterans Voices
in just a few.
Veterans Voices, brought to you by Bradley's Military.
Welcome back. Injured in Afghanistan, but still competing at home.
Meet the athlete and veteran who is not letting anything hold her back.
We were a part of a forward operating base, which was Shank, that was constantly under attack. And they were also an artillery support base, so you never knew if the bombs you were hearing were incoming or outgoing.
In September of 2009, Monica Southall was a part of one of those incidents. She was working on top of a mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle when bombs from an airstrike landed too close. Monica Southall's knees, shoulders, and spinal cord were injured. Between 2004 and the present, Southall has had 27 surgeries.
What I remember of that day, I was on top of one of the MRAP trucks doing inventory, and I remember my soldier coming to me and saying, "Hey, Sergeant Southall, come here for a second." And I was like, "Okay, just 1 second." And before I could even get to him, I heard it. I heard the bomb. I saw it, and I tried to get off the truck, and yeah, I fell. So that's pretty much my memory of that day.
Southall is not angry from the experience, but is honored to have fought on the front lines for our country.
It was something I'm very proud to say that I served in, and I was able to do my part to try and keep America safe. If I wasn't medically retired, if I could have stayed in the Army, unfortunately my injuries were too severe and I had to be medically retired, but I was hoping to do 20 years, and if I had a chance to go back to Iraq or Afghanistan, even now, I would still go.
As a former athlete, Southall has always made her way back on the track as an outlet to help give back through sports.
Sports have always been very important to me. When I came back from Afghanistan, unfortunately, I wasn't able to play the sports that I played prior to leaving.
But competing fell back into the lap of Southall as she was asked to participate in the Warrior Games and Invictus Games, where wounded veterans compete. A platform where she excelled, winning 5 gold medals in discus, shot put, and sitting volleyball.
Sometimes you need an outlet, or you need a reason to get up. And the games to me were a reason to get up every morning and train hard and just try and do my best, to compete, not only in life, but at the games as well.
The games not only served as a means of exercise and competition, but allowed Southall to meet Prince Harry, a memory she will cherish forever.
So in the picture, he's actually holding my medals, and he gave me the picture. So I thought that was very awesome from him, because he's a very busy person, he has things to do, but he was willing to take 2 seconds to give me the picture that he promised.
Southall continues to stay involved as a coach.
I love giving back. I love being able to show other soldiers what I've learned through the games and what I've experienced and what I've been through, and also just pass on anything that I've learned as a soldier medically as well.
Southall's service and her perseverance in the face of adversity is an inspiration to us all. For Veterans Voices, I'm Natalie Calabat.
Next, in our Veterans Voices series, a story that spans 2 continents and multiple generations.
The effort to get a prayer book dropped on a European battlefield back to one soldier's family.
Bill Lynn is a real military buff.
To us, this is very personal.
It's probably because he served 27 years in the Army.
I deployed 8 times.
Service is in his DNA and in his warehouse, where he has a museum in Colorado Springs, Colorado, dedicated to veterans. We're talking old uniforms, pictures, newspaper clippings, everything.
We don't want this stuff ending up in a dumpster or in a pawn shop someplace.
But this
is the artifact here just below my hand.
This might be his most prized possession, and when you hear the long journey this little prayer book took to get here, you'll understand why. Here's the book right there in the hands of little Edmund Eddie Sternot as a child, and it remained his pocket companion a few years later during World War II, where he kept it in his uniform every day during the Battle of the Bulge.
Where on the 13th of January 1945 he was killed in action in a place called Bois-Jacques.
A young staff sergeant, 4,000 miles from home, who died in service to his country. Sternot was buried here in this American cemetery in Belgium, but his book, it stayed on the battleground. Seems it likely fell from his pocket the day he died and remained here in the woods. 60-plus years later, fate brought it to Bill Lynn at a church service nearby in Belgium, honoring Battle of the Bulge heroes. A woman approached him.
And she explained that her father was a woodcutter in 1947. He was chopping wood in that forest, and he discovered this book lying on the forest floor.
That woman really wanted Bill to return it to Eddie's family in America, and he was happy to, even found a clue on its tattered pages.
This book, as it turns out, had his name and address in Wisconsin inside. To believe that after all that time, could be legible was really amazing.
But Bill knew there had to be more to this story. He did some research and found out just a week before Eddie died, he did something heroic. He held off a German attack. Tank rounds were being fired at his machine gun post, but he and his men beat back the enemy, saving American lives. And for that, he was awarded the Silver Star for heroism, but he died before he could ever receive it, and his family never got it either.
That created an entirely different chapter to this, which only recently was concluded.
This is to certify that the President of the United States of America has awarded the Bronze Star Medal to Staff Sergeant Edmund J. Sternot, United States Army.
Last Veterans Day in California, 75 years after his death, Eddie Sternot finally got a Silver Star, a Bronze Star, and a Purple Heart.
It's wonderful.
And there to receive those medals was his little cousin Dolores, his only living relative.
And I'm glad he finally got his due justice.
All books tell stories, but few contain the mystery and adventure of this old prayer book. It even has a happy ending, too, thanks to a veteran who helped write its final chapter.
The worst thing is not to die in combat. The worst thing is to be forgotten.
For Veterans Voices, I'm Jeremy Hubbard.
More Veterans Voices stories on the way.
Stay with us.
Veterans Voices, brought to you by S&R Automotive.
Welcome back. He served during intense combat in Vietnam
and returned home to improve the training and treatment of U.S. military recruits. The story up next in our Veterans Voices series.
During the Vietnam War, Tony Nadal's personal creed kept him moving toward the sound of guns,
It was boom, 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 boom.
toward enemy soldiers,
They're throwing hand grenades at me.
and toward his own fallen company men.
We won't leave anyone behind.
Born and raised by a West Point graduate, that's all Nadal ever wanted to do.
There's a history of guys graduating from the military academy and doing the right thing.
For him, doing the right thing meant using his qualifications in Vietnam.
I was very clear as to what my duty was as a company commander. I was going to lead from the front.
His ideals were put to the test during the Battle of Ia Drang in 1965. American troops were outnumbered by thousands. In Nadal's company, 17 of his 95 soldiers were killed. He remembers trying to retrieve a lieutenant's body from a creek bed in the middle of a firefight.
I find there's another soldier there who's still alive, and he also got left behind. And he survives. I get taken back to our front lines.
Later, Nadal got orders to rescue a platoon that was surrounded by enemy forces. As Nadal and his men moved forward, 3 standing on either side of him were killed by machine gun fire.
Why the Lord spared me on that given day, I don't know.
Later in the war, Nadal was moving through a rice paddy next to a soldier who was shot and killed. That soldier had passed on another assignment because he wanted to serve under Nadal.
And because of that, he died. And that hurts. Every time I talk about it, that hurts.
It hurts because Nadal believes above all in his duty to his own soldiers.
You've got to be worthy of your soldiers. I felt personally responsible for them.
When Nadal returned to the United States, he took what he learned in combat and sought to modernize the Army.
In training in special forces.
He got a master's in social psychology and eventually taught at West Point. At that time, he says freshmen were still being abused as they went through the initial plebe system.
And I thought it was abysmal. It was the worst example of leadership. You couldn't treat a soldier like that and gain any respect from him.
During his time with the psychology department, Nidal shared a study of the plebe system.
We wrote a study that just devastated that system. The West Point they see today and the way they treat the incoming freshmen, whatever, is derived from that study that I chaired.
In Nidal's Army career, you see a sense of responsibility, of taking care of others. He told me he'd like to see more of that in his own country.
What we don't have in this country now is a sense of I am partially responsible for him. We are responsible for each other.
For Veterans Voices, I'm Lex Gray.
More Veterans Voices stories
in just a few.
Veterans Voices, brought to you by Samaritan Medical Center.
Welcome back to Veterans Voices.
Our next story is about veterans helping other veterans.
For Vietnam veteran Henry Mack, joining the armed forces was a no-brainer.
I looked at the different branches and I selected the Navy, and that was Friday, September the 13th, 1963.
Mack completed 5 combat tours overseas and settled down in Chesterfield County in Virginia. When he returned to the U.S., Mack says he suffered from PTSD, nerve damage from Agent Orange, chronic pain, and more. And he thought the VA would help him with his medical bills.
I filed a claim 67, that was in New Jersey, but it was 1998 before I got the claim adjudicated. And I'm gonna tell you, I was a bitter, unhappy man.
He wasn't alone. He witnessed other veterans in his shoes all around the country.
We served the country, we returned to the world, and America was hostile to us.
One of those Americans was Army veteran Benjamin Burke, who waited for years to hear anything about his benefits.
It's a damn shame for them folks to be treating veterans the way they treat them after they go out and serve the country.
Mack says it was infuriating to see veterans like Burke get denied day in and day out, but he didn't let it get the best of him.
I know they're not taking care of me. I said, but I got to use wisdom. The thing that sustained me in Vietnam was my faith. Now, I'm not going to tell you I walked on water, but my faith and determination sustained me.
After many years of failure, Mack said enough was enough and started the nonprofit Veterans Helping Veterans to give a helping hand to his fellow service members.
Dealing with homelessness, dealing with filing a claim, rejecting, sending a notice of disagreement, requesting a hearing, and even going to the Board of Veteran Appeal.
Burke is just one of more than 4,000 veterans who were assisted by this organization by helping veterans find job opportunities, secure VA benefits, help those who experience sexual trauma, and access additional resources like mental health services and even home repair.
For more on this story and all of our stories tonight, you can find them on informnny.com.
For more Veterans Voices stories, stay tuned.
Veterans Voices, brought to you by AUSA.
Welcome back. For veterans battling physical conditions or mental health issues, a service dog can be an invaluable companion.
Now we take you to the place that trains them and makes them available for those who serve.
Dottie? Dottie, watch me. Okay, let's go. Good girl. This is Dottie. She is 19 months old and she is a black lab. She's been paired with me.
After 7 years in the Army, Michelle went back to civilian life,
But it wasn't easy.
For me, basically, it is climbing Mount Everest every time I leave my house.
Michelle was having trouble going out in public. Eventually, she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Simple task for a person without PTSD, I should say, is something that I cannot do. For example, going to the grocery store is a task I'm not able to do. I'm not able to go to Target. Walmart, forget it.
Like many veterans, she's gone through a list of treatments and therapies to no avail until she learned about Service Dogs of Virginia, located in Charlottesville.
My hope for having Dottie is that I am finally able to return to a normal life again, that I am able to have a sense of normalcy back in my life. Good girl, let's go.
But getting a dog like Dottie is easier said than done. It cost approximately $40,000 over a 2-year period to raise, train, and place a successful service dog with a person in need. Sally Day serves as the Director of Development at Service Dogs of Virginia.
I do everything I can to raise funds. We do not pass on that cost to our clients. I write grants. We have individual donors. I get corporate sponsorships.
Since 2000, the organization has placed over 95 dogs with clients throughout Virginia.
How do you guys go about placement? I imagine there's a long list of people who are needing assistance.
When service dog organizations began, they all started with a waiting list because there was so much need. Essentially, we're trying to meet the need that's out there, and that's why we have grown.
Today was day 2 of transfer camp for the dogs and the new owners. It's a little different than in years past with social distancing and mask wearing. Each dog here is being paired for different clients with different needs.
Go in.
Michelle excited about her new relationship. In 2 weeks, they'll be out on their own.
This is just a tool for me to carry around with me. This is going to be like having my best friend with me wherever I go.
She hopes by sharing her story, other veterans will be inspired.
I think it's extremely important. Not all wounds are visible.
Knowing that it's okay to ask for a helping hand or paw to guide them through a difficult time.
I would encourage them to reach out, seek the help. Nobody's going to look at you differently.
For Veterans Voices, I'm Constance Jones.
After the break,
more Veterans Voices.
Veterans Voices, brought to you by Bradley's Military.
welcome back. What's the secret to living to be 100 years old?
The veteran in our next story has that answer.
I am doing great. It's a wonderful afternoon.
That positive attitude and a sharp memory have been hallmarks of Mr. Anthony Grant. He was 21, living in New York's Harlem Borough.
I was working as a printer's apprentice. Eventually, of course, I became a journalist.
Grant was born in New York, but spent most of his early years in St. Lucia in the Caribbean. Shortly after returning, he was drafted.
I realized that once I got into the Army, my life would be changed forever.
Grant trained at the Army's Fort Dix, New Jersey, and Fort Lee in Petersburg, Virginia. And that's where he got his first real dose of racism in the armed forces.
So there was a town called Grenada, Mississippi, and I was in the camp near the base for 6 months, and I went in town only twice.
Attitudes in Mississippi were about the same. Grant, like many blacks in World War II, were assigned to the Quartermaster Corps, loading, storing, and delivering supplies to troops on the front lines. And in June of 1944, those front lines were Normandy, France, days after the massive Allied attack known as D-Day.
Within the beach itself, it was a complete chaos. Burned equipment.
And as the combat troops pushed forward toward Germany, that's when Grant's troops came under fire.
I've been shot at, and I in turn have shot my weapon.
After the war, Grant moved up the ranks in the Quartermaster Corps while serving all over Europe, Korea, and Japan. He retired after 20 years with the rank of Major in 1963.
You've reached the ripe age of 100. Do you have a secret for longevity?
Have a positive mind. Have a positive mind. Things will get better tomorrow.
For Veterans Voices, I'm Don Roberts.
We'll be right back with more Veterans Voices
after the break.
Veterans Voices, brought to you by S&R Automotive.
Welcome back. It is the exact opposite of what soldiers usually experience on the battlefield.
Next, we take you to a peaceful retreat in the countryside of Virginia, designed specifically for veterans.
Pierre Larkin is a veteran who retired after 32 years of serving in the Marines, Air Force, and the Army.
And that's hard. I have combat PTSD. That's one of my issues.
He says earlier this year, he found himself in a hard place.
I was angry, I was upset, I was being stressed out.
That's when Larkin found Willing Warriors. Shirley Dominic, a 22-year Air Force veteran, is the co-founder of Willing Warriors, the nonprofit that runs the Warrior Retreat at Bull Run.
And they can be cared for here like never before.
She says she was inspired to open the retreat for veterans who just need to get away after a challenge at church to help others.
Going to visit the wounded warriors at Walter Reed. And so that one visit changed our entire life.
Dominic felt compelled to help the wounded veterans and those struggling with internal unseen injuries. So that 40-day church challenge turned into what she calls a life-changing decision to purchase this 11,000 square foot estate on 37 acres of land with sweeping views of the Blue Ridge Mountains.
So it's 5 bedrooms, if you can imagine, and they're all master suites.
The retreat is meant to house veterans and their families and friends and provide them with an opportunity to heal emotionally, while some of them work on healing physically at nearby hospitals.
Lots of them have appointments day after day that they have to get to, and this is really taking them out of that environment and say, forget about those appointments.
The house is wheelchair accessible and equipped with a theater room, games, playgrounds, and a memorial garden. Veterans can also participate in activities like horseback riding or relax with a massage. And they can have gourmet meals prepared for them and their guests at the home. Willing Warriors also partners with other nonprofits in the area, like the Mighty Oaks Foundation, that provides post-traumatic stress training to groups of veterans from around the country, right here on the retreat grounds. Willing Warriors has become so popular, it's growing.
PenFed Foundation, they gave us $300,000 so that we can build our second home.
Dominic says now they can help twice as many warriors, and she plans to build 2 more houses.
You have to understand that we're institutionalized not to complain and to drive on, so we're not going to ask for anything.
Larkin says that's why even the small things, like the chance to get away for a few days, can mean the world.
The average is 22 veterans a day commit suicide. 22.
In his thank you letter to Willing Warriors, Larkin wrote that every time the retreat doors open, you have reduced the 22-a-day loss by 1. Any veteran who wants to participate can get more information at willingwarriors.org. In Washington, Alexandra Limon.
We see a field of heroes who served their country. But Don Milne,
when you look at his date of death, it says June 5th, 1943.
Right here, he sees thousands of stories desperate to be told.
So Everett Burkholz here was actually born in Colorado.
And he wants to tell as many of them as possible.
So they put him on a Belgian liner. It was called the SS Leopoldville.
Milne lives in Utah, but visited Denver's Fort Logan National Cemetery as part of his new project, Stories Behind the Stars.
His location on the ship, he probably was killed by the torpedo.
He spent the last 3 years researching and writing about the fallen heroes of World War II.
Just because it was an accident doesn't mean that we shouldn't remember people like Everett.
His goal is to compile short histories of each of the 400,000 plus American service members killed in that war.
I got into this because I started just as a hobby because my kids are older and I have some free time. Every day I would write the story of someone who died during World War II. And I wrote more than 1,200 of those stories between the 75th anniversary of the end of Pearl Harbor and the 75th anniversary of the signing of the peace with Japan on the battleship Missouri.
In the end, he wants to create a searchable database, even a smartphone app, so users could visit a place like this, scan a name on a headstone.
Yep, that's his story, and we've got it all written here. so someone could read it while they're visiting his gravesite.
And be taken straight to a webpage that tells the soldier's story.
And I think it'll give them an idea of what freedoms we have in this country, because these people paid the price.
It isn't going to be easy. So far, he's only compiled about 1,200 profiles.
Looking for the grave of Harry Nelson.
So he's enlisting help, researching these enlisted men and women.
His plane actually ditched in the ocean, so this is a cenotaph grave. He's not actually here.
He wants family members and friends to submit stories about their heroes who died, and volunteers to help write about these historic men and women.
They just visit grave sites, find the name of someone who died in World War II, and write their story. It only takes an hour or two to write a story. We give you free access to research sites like Ancestry, newspapers, Fold3, and if you can write an obituary, you can do one of these stories.
Already, people from all over the country and all over the world have offered to take part.
We don't have a lot of professional genealogists, historians that are helping us out. It's mostly just people that have some free time. They have a love for those who served our country. They want to see their stories remembered. And so they're writing these stories. It's amazing.
His objective may seem ambitious, overwhelming, and impossible.
His story is he was in the 66th Infantry Division.
But compared to the goal these heroes fought for in faraway lands more than 75 years ago, it's the least he can do.
There's no reason in the year 2020 why we can't have grave sites that are more than just names on stone.
For Veterans Voices, I'm Jeremy Hubbard.
After the break,
our local chapter of Guitars for Vets.
Veterans Voices, brought to you by Samaritan Medical Center.
welcome back.
For our final story this evening, I talked to our local chapter of Guitars for Vets. The sound of a guitar.
You put a few vibrations into it, and this sound comes into your ears and goes into the pleasure centers of your brain, into your heart and your chest, and it's your music, and you own it.
Veteran and guitar enthusiast Jim Corvo has been playing for a while.
He got his first guitar in 1982 as an anniversary present from me when I was going to college. He spends an incredible amount of time playing the guitar.
His wife, Mary, enjoys it too.
It is something that we both benefit from because I love the music.
Together in a basement about 15 minutes from the 10th Mountain Division's Fort Drum, we found them sharing their love for guitars.
How you doing?
Good, how are you? Where they founded a local chapter of Guitars for Vets.
We had to have something here local, given all of our vets and all of our soldiers and this community and what it is. So we decided to start it up.
The organization has a much larger goal than just teaching a few tunes.
Well, it's important for anybody, but particularly veterans, because many of them are suffering from their military service. Whether it's PTSD, whether it's just the stress of being a soldier. I wore a uniform for 30 years as well, and I understand anybody that raises their right hand and signs on to wearing the nation's colors and serving in uniform deserves everything we can give them. And this is just one little piece that we can make happen here locally.
For some involved in the program, it's a healthier option for dealing with these issues.
I was swallowing a lot of booze every week, and it was mainly because things would bother me about things in the past and all that, and on and on and on. Now I just got to grab this and go sit down.
For others, it's about fulfilling a childhood dream or playing for their families.
Well, I hope to get my first record contract in about a couple of years. No, it's just, I want to just stay with it. You know, Lori enjoys it. I play around the house a lot, and it's a lot of fun. So I just want to keep playing.
But for Mary and Jim, it doesn't seem to matter why or how it's helping these veterans and active duty soldiers, as long as it's helping.
Guitars for Vets specifically has opened our eyes to the incredible group of people within the community that have served our nation and had the ability to help them in one way or another.
A gift as much for the mentor as it is the pupil.
The feeling that you get when the person you're teaching gets it, oh God, that is just like, oh, you can walk on cloud nine for a long time on that, believe me.
A gift that keeps on giving.
You're a lifetime student with guitar, you never know it all. And so it's one of those things that you can take for life. You'll never stop learning how to play better and better and enjoying music.
As a senior operator out there, those are stresses that you kind of keep to yourself, and you don't share those with anybody because you can't, because they're looking to you for the answers. Well, for me to relax, that guitar's the answer. So I didn't think I could do it, and I got in here, learned a few chords, learned a couple songs, and it's a journey I want to keep in my life and keep going. It's a lot of fun.
And a gift that anyone can give.
Music and what it does for people. This is something everyone can provide, and anyone who plays a guitar has the ability to teach someone else how to play the guitar. And so it's something you can share and grow.
For more information on Guitars for Vets or any of our stories tonight, go to informandny.com.
Thanks for watching Veterans Voices. Have a good night.